It was the spring of 1891, near the tail end of a dry spell that had cracked the earth around Abner's Hollow into rust-colored plate. The town was little more than a depot, a leaning chapel, and a row of buildings that kept changing names but not hands. Along the rail line that skirted the western edge, 4 children lay curled against the wind, their backs pressed to one another for warmth, the smell of old smoke and cinders clinging to their coats. The girl, who was the oldest, did not sleep. She kept her eyes on the horizon where the tracks narrowed to nothing. Her name was Elsie McCrae. She was 16, but her shoulders had been bearing the weight of the world since she was 11. The youngest boy, Teddy, whimpered in his sleep, one arm flung over his little sister Ruthie, who never cried out loud. Not even when their mother died the winter before. The fourth was Jonah, near to 12, quiet as an owl and just as watchful. He had a wound in his leg from stepping on a rusted fence nail 3 days back. Elsie had wrapped it with a strip of muslin torn from their mother's old apron, and now the cloth was stained black and stuck fast to the skin. The train had long gone. They hadn't meant to fall asleep near the tracks, but the warmth from the metal and the dying coals had drawn them close. No one in town had offered them more than a sideways glance. The night wind came down hard from the north. It rattled the dry brush and carried the smell of dust and something like copper. Elsie clutched Jonah's coat tighter around his middle and leaned back against the old switch post, its wood splintered from years of disuse. She did not pray any more. In the far dark a shape moved. Hooves slow and heavy beat against the ground with the sound of distant thunder. Elsie sat up, her hand going to the pocket knife her pa had given her the day before he rode west and never came back. A man on horseback emerged from the black. He rode without hurry, and the horse beneath him was old but steady, with a gait that said the trail behind them had been long and lonesome. The man wore a wide hat pulled low and a coat that looked like it had seen better years. His boots were scuffed and his face shadowed, but there was a stillness to the way he held the reins, like someone used to silence. He stopped 10 paces from them. The horse huffed and stamped once. Elsie rose to her feet slowly. Her limbs ached from the cold. "You alone out here?" the man asked. His voice was rough but not unkind. She didn't answer, just squared her shoulders and kept the others behind her. He tilted his head. "That your brother limpin'?" Still she didn't speak. The man sighed through his nose and swung down from the saddle. "Ain't looking for trouble," he said. "Name's Whit. Been riding since Calico Springs." He unhooked his canteen and tossed it gently at her feet. "They'll need water soon." Elsie waited until he stepped back. Then she bent and picked up the canteen, unscrewed the top, and sniffed. Clean. Cold. She handed it to Ruthie, who drank, then passed it on. Whit stood quiet, watching. After a while he said, "Got a stew pot and some coffee in my pack. If you don't mind me sharing, I'll build a fire a little ways off." "No strings." "What do you want?" Elsie finally said. "Just to sit a while," he replied. "World's too wide for a man to keep talking to himself." She studied him. He didn't look like the kind to lie, but she'd learned not to trust much. Still, her stomach was hollow as a wagon wheel, and Jonah's wound needed looking after. She nodded once. "No closer than the tree line," she said. He tipped his hat and moved slow, giving them space. The 4 orphans sat huddled again, eyes fixed on the fire he kindled in a dry circle of stone. Smoke lifted like a ribbon into the dark, and for the first time in weeks, something other than fear filled the space between heartbeats. Elsie didn't trust him. Not yet. But she watched how he moved, how he bent to stir the beans and laid his rifle just out of reach, not hidden, just seen. And that night, for the first time in too long, they slept with the warmth of a fire on their skin. In the gray quiet of morning, the fire had burned to coals. A few blackbirds pecked near the edges of the clearing, their wings sharp against the flat sky. The children stirred slowly, blinking against the new light muscles, stiff from too many nights on the ground. Whit was already awake, sitting cross-legged near his saddle. He held a battered tin cup between his hands, steam rising in soft curls. Elsie noticed he hadn't come any closer during the night. He'd kept his distance like he said he would. That meant something. She sat up, brushing twigs from her skirt, and looked at Jonah. His skin was pale, and the cloth around his leg was stuck firm, now crusted in blood and pus. He didn't say a word, but she could tell the pain was crawling up into him, slow and dangerous. Whit glanced her way. "Let me see it," he said. Elsie hesitated. Then she took a breath and nodded once. Whit walked over, slow, knelt beside Jonah. His hands were steady, sure. He peeled the fabric back with a gentleness that surprised her. Jonah hissed through his teeth, but didn't cry out. "Needs cleaning," Whit muttered. "And salve." "We don't have any," Elsie said. "I do." He stood and returned with a tin from his saddlebag, opened it, and dipped 2 fingers into a yellowish paste that smelled sharp and bitter. As he worked, he spoke low to Jonah, nothing important, just where he'd once seen a boy fall off a mule and end up with 2 black eyes and a crooked toe. Jonah didn't laugh, but he listened. That was something. When it was done, Whit wrapped the leg with fresh cloth from his own kit and sat back. "He needs rest. And food that ain't just beans." "We don't have money," Elsie said, bracing for what would come next. Whit looked at her, not like most men did. Not with pity or that look like she was a burden he couldn't shake. Just quiet eyes. Didn't ask for it. Later, while the little ones picked at what was left of the bread, he offered. Elsie stood apart, arms crossed. The land stretched out behind her in hard lines. Whit came up beside her, not too close. "You, their sister." She nodded. "Where's your folks?" She didn't answer right away. "Then gone." Whit squinted into the distance. "Mine too." Something in the way he said it made her turn her head. He didn't seem broken, just worn down in a way she understood. He pointed his chin toward the south. "There's a farmstead not far. Used to belong to a man I knew. He passed last fall. Left it to dust and birds, but there's a well. A roof. You could come with me. Rest a while. Ain't much, but better than this." Elsie narrowed her eyes. "Why would you help?" He didn't speak for a moment. "Then a man's got to answer to himself out here. I seen enough kids go under to know it don't sit right." That night, after the fire was built again and the children fed, Elsie sat with her knees drawn to her chest. The sky was wide open above them, stars sharp like they'd been stabbed into the dark. She didn't trust easy, but she saw the way Ruthie leaned into the warmth and how Teddy had laughed once when Whit told a story about a horse that wouldn't cross water unless someone sang to it. Jonah was sleeping better. His color had come back just a little. Maybe the world hadn't stopped being cruel, but for now someone had put a hand out instead of turning away. She stared into the fire and didn't speak, but she stayed close. Subscribe and ride where justice is never simple. They left the tracks by mid-morning, walking slow behind Whit's horse, who carried Jonah and the heavier things. The path south was mostly scrub and dry wind, the kind that blew grit into your teeth and eyes until you forgot what comfort used to feel like. The farmstead sat in a low dip in the land, hemmed in by cottonwoods and pale stone. There was no gate, just a sagging wire fence and a barn with half its roof peeled back by storms. But there was a well, like he said, and a long, narrow house with a porch wide enough to sit a spell if you had time to wait. It was quiet there. No bird song, just the creak of old wood and the wind fussing through the grass. Elsie stood still, the little ones at her sides, and took it in. "This it?" she asked. Whit nodded. "Ain't much, but it's safe." Inside, the house was dusty and smelled of dried herbs and thyme. Elsie touched the wall with the tips of her fingers, feeling the cool through the boards. Jonah was laid out in the back room where the shutters still held tight. Ruthie and Teddy followed Whit around the main room as he opened trunks and unwrapped oilskin bundles of beans, coffee, dried apples. Elsie cleaned. She needed to move. Her body was tired, but her mind spun like a top. She scrubbed the table, aired the bedding, swept the porch. She didn't ask for help. She wouldn't. That evening Whit made stew from what he had, and they ate at the table like they belonged to the place. Ruthie whispered her thanks. Teddy nodded off with his cheek against the wood. Jonah was already asleep. Later, Elsie stood by the door while Whit smoked a hand-rolled cigarette out on the steps. He didn't talk much. She liked that. "Where you from?" he asked finally. "Kansas. Some town nobody remembers." "Run off." "No. Stayed as long as we could. Ma died. Then Pa disappeared into the hills one day and didn't come back. I figure he's bones or whiskey now." Whit didn't nod or offer sympathy. He just looked out into the darkness. "I was from down near Sabine originally," he said after a while. "Mama died birthing my sister. She didn't make it either. Pa blamed God, then blamed me. Left a scar across my shoulder once with a broken halter. I left at 15. Elsie said nothing. Her throat was tight. He kept talking, not like he needed to, but like he hadn't in a long time. "Thought I'd be a preacher once. Got as far as Amarillo before a fight broke out at the wrong saloon. After that, I just kept moving. Horses, fences, a few gun hands. Nothing ever stuck. And now I try to sleep better at night." A pause hung between them. "You gonna run off?" she asked. "No, ma'am." He said it quiet but sure, like someone who didn't promise things lightly. Elsie looked up at the stars again. They seemed less cruel here. "I don't know if I can stay," she admitted. "Don't have to know. Just don't go yet." She nodded, almost invisible, and stepped back inside. And so it began, not with a vow or a firelit confession, but with the sharing of silence, a roof, and a pot of stew. Not trust, not yet, but something close. The days stretched out steady like lines in a plowed field. Sun-up work, sundown sleep. Whit taught Jonah how to bind a fishing line and clean a wound properly. He showed Teddy how to gather dry wood without snapping every twig and scaring off half the animals in the county. Ruthie stayed close to Elsie, helping with the wash and learning to bake cornbread in a pan blackened by years of use. Whit never gave orders, just made room for them to figure it out. Elsie started trusting the quiet. She watched Whit when he thought no one noticed. The way he leaned on the porch rail in the morning, eyes closed, listening to the wind like it might say something worth hearing. The way he handled the rifle, not proud, not careless, but like it was just part of him. She noticed how he never drank, not even when the evenings turned long. One morning Elsie found him mending the fence line, sleeves rolled to the elbow, sweat darkening the back of his neck. She came with a bucket of water and sat it down without a word. He looked up, eyes squinting against the sun. "Appreciate it." She lingered, arms folded. "Why'd you stop?" she asked. "That night by the tracks." "What made you stop?" He didn't answer right away. "Truth is," he said slowly, "I nearly didn't." Elsie waited. "I rode past you. Maybe 10 paces or so. Told myself I couldn't help everyone. Told myself you'd move along like most folks do. But then I heard a sound." "What sounds?" "Someone said mama real soft. Maybe the little one. That word, it don't leave a man the same." Elsie swallowed. He looked at her then. "You carry a lot. I see it. But you don't have to carry it all alone." She opened her mouth, but no words came. That night, after the little ones were in bed, she found him sharpening a knife by the fire. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked. "Used to. Every day. Now I don't know." "Why?" He looked up at her. "Place feels less empty." They were quiet a long while. The fire popped and hissed. "I used to want to be a teacher," she said finally. "Teach reading, maybe sewing. Something calm." He smiled at that. "You'd be good at it. I'm not soft." "I didn't say you were." Elsie glanced toward the house where the children slept behind thin walls. "They're mine now. I didn't ask for it, but they're mine. I reckon they know that." He leaned forward, fed another stick to the flames. "You ever think about staying?" she asked. "More than I should." That was how it began. Not with a kiss or even a touch. Just a folding and a leaning toward two people, letting the quiet between them mean something. The land didn't change. The wind still came howling down the hills, and the sun still baked the earth raw by noon. But inside that little house where 4 children had once slept beside the tracks, there was a slow shift. A shared bowl. A warm blanket. A space at the table no longer borrowed. Trouble came in on a wagon with too much shine. It was early summer when the man arrived. Sleek boots, silver-studded belt, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name was Nathan Varner, though he didn't say it at first. He just tipped his hat and called out from the road like he was checking in on a neighbor. Whit didn't smile back. He stepped off the porch with his rifle held easy but visible. "What brings you?" "Land survey," the man said. "Some parcels around here are up for sale. Folks are asking questions." "This land's not for sale." Wasn't clear in the record. "You squatting?" Whit didn't answer. Elsie stood in the doorway, one hand on Ruthie's shoulder. Jonah had come to stand behind her, limping less now. Varner's eyes flicked toward the house, toward the children. "You got mouths to feed. That gets expensive. Someone made you an offer yet?" Whit stepped forward. "You need to turn your wagon around." Varner laughed low and thin. "I'll be back," he said. "With paper. And names." He left a dust cloud behind him. That night, Whit didn't sleep. Neither did Elsie. They sat at the table after the others had gone quiet, the oil lamp flickering low. "He's from the county office?" she asked. "Doubt it. More likely from a cattle outfit sniffing for water rights." Elsie pressed her palms flat against the table. "You said this place belonged to a friend?" "It did. Wasn't ever deeded proper. Just lived on work passed along. Like most things out here. So we can be run off." Whit looked at her. "Not if we stay ahead of it." They spent the next week fencing the west pasture tighter, clearing brush near the well, boarding up loose spots in the barn. Whit rode into town one morning and came back with a packet of forms and a pencil worn to the nub. They filled it out together. Names. Signatures. Statements. "Won't stop a fight," he said, "but gives us ground to stand on." But it wasn't the land alone that twisted Elsie's gut. It was the feeling that the life they'd started building could slip like water through cracks. One evening, Whit found her out by the cottonwoods, hands clenched around a frayed rope she'd been using to tie bean poles. "I can't do it again," she said. "Do what?" "Lose everything. Move on with pockets full of dead ends." Whit didn't touch her, just stood close. "You're not alone this time. You could go," she said, voice tight. "No one would stop you. You've got no stake in us." He took his time answering. "Don't need a paper to tell me what matters." She turned toward him. Her eyes weren't soft. They were fierce with fear and all the weight she'd been carrying since her ma took her last breath. "Then prove it," she said. He met her gaze steady. "I will." That night he moved his bedroll to the barn loft. Said it was for better watch over the pasture, but Elsie knew. It was his way of saying he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not without a fight. The days hardened. They waited for Varner. For a knock. For a claim. But each morning they woke with the sun still rising, the fire still warm, and one another still near. Varner came back just before harvest when the earth was cracked and the heat smelled like iron. He wasn't alone this time. 2 men rode behind him, young stone-faced, their shirts clean in a way that didn't match the dust. Whit saw them from the pasture and met them at the gate. He wore the same worn shirt, the same old boots, but his rifle hung across his back now, not in the house. "You said you'd be back," Whit said. "Told you I would," Varner replied, swinging down from his saddle. "I got papers. Got men to witness. Got word from a buyer in San Antonio who'll take the whole section if you clear off by the week's end. It ain't for sale. It ain't yours," Varner snapped, the false charm dropping. "Not legally. You're just playing house with someone else's dirt." From the porch, Elsie stepped down, her hands balled into fists. Jonah stood behind her with Teddy and Ruthie close. "This is our home," she said. "You don't get to say otherwise." Varner turned. "You're the girl. Heard about you. Ragged bunch camped by the rails. Thought you were smart to find yourself a man to hang on to." Whit stepped between them. "You got 2 minutes to turn your wagon around." Varner's mouth twisted. "You threatening me?" "I'm telling you." One of the riders shifted, hand brushing the butt of his pistol. Whit's voice cut through the air. "You pull that iron and I'll put you in the ground. Fast. No warning." The air snapped tight. But the rider didn't move. Neither did Whit. Behind him, Elsie walked back into the house and returned holding the deed paper they'd filled out, rough and wrinkled, but signed. "We filed this," she said. "It's pending. Maybe it won't hold, but you'll have to wait to find out. Or come through us." Varner stepped forward, reached for it. Whit blocked him. "You want to fight children for land that won't love you back?" Whit asked. Varner looked past him, saw the porch, the worn boards, the patched roof. He spat once in the dirt. "You'll lose," he said. "Maybe," Whit replied. "But it won't be today." They rode off. No gunfire. No blood. But the kind of tension that takes hours to breathe out. That night, Whit sat on the steps again, his rifle across his knees. Elsie brought him coffee and sat beside him, the night cool around them. "You meant it," she said. "All of it." He looked at her, tired but clear. "I'd rather die right here beside you all than live safe somewhere else." She reached out, rested her hand over his. And neither of them pulled away. In the barn, Teddy's laugh echoed, once sharp and light. Ruthie hummed to herself. Jonah turned the pages of an old book Whit had found. The home still stood. The fight wasn't over. But the roots had sunk in. Autumn came soft that year, the way it sometimes does after a hard stretch, like the land itself was trying to make amends. The cottonwoods turned gold, the fields brittle but forgiving, and a cold edge whispered into the mornings. Inside the house, the children filled the rooms with the rhythm of living. Ruthie hummed while she sewed patches into the knees of Jonah's trousers. Teddy chased chickens with a stick, never catching them but laughing all the same. Jonah had begun walking strong again, limping only when he was tired. Elsie sat at the table one night reading by lantern glow. Whit came in from the dock, brushing dust off his shoulders. He watched her a moment before speaking. "You still thinking of teaching?" She looked up. "I never stopped." "There's a schoolhouse in Dry Fork," he said. "Empty now. Folks say it used to hold 12 children. All moved off or grown." She said nothing, just folded the page and waited. I asked around. "The circuit clerk in Abner's Hollow, he's got a form. Need someone who can read, write, and spell their name without help. Think you could manage that?" She stared at him. Her chest felt too full for breath. "You did that?" "I did." "Why?" He pulled off his hat and set it on the table, fingers lingering on the brim. "Because when I picture what comes next, I see you standing in front of a chalkboard. And I see me building a fence that don't fall down every spring. And I see those 3 kids knowing what it means to wake up without running. Elsie covered her mouth with one hand, eyes stinging. He reached for her other hand. She let him take it. "I don't need a preacher," she whispered. "Good," he said. "I ain't one." They stayed like that, fingers threaded. Weeks passed. Whit filed the land claim, and this time it stuck. They had neighbors now, a widow with 2 sons, a quiet blacksmith, a retired cattleman with a limp and a fiddle. Folks began stopping by, leaving jars of jam, bolts of fabric news from town. By early winter the schoolhouse door creaked open again. Elsie swept the floor clean herself, nailed new hinges to the shutters, and painted her name on a small sign out front. Miss McCrae, it read. Whit repaired the bell tower. Jonah helped, holding nails in his mouth and grinning every time one went in straight. There was no wedding dress. No rings either, not yet. Just a quiet morning in January when they stood beneath the cottonwoods, the children at their sides, and spoke soft promises in the breath-white cold. No guests. No vows read from a book. Just truth. And when it was done, Ruthie handed Elsie a ribbon she'd been hiding in her apron pocket. "You're our mama now," she said. Elsie knelt, tied it in Ruthie's hair instead. That night they lit a fire so warm the windows steamed. They ate cornbread and stew and played fiddle songs until the children fell asleep in a heap on the rug. Whit pulled a small box from his coat. Inside was a copper button from his mother's dress, and a piece of twine wound into a ring. "For now," he said, "till we can afford better." Elsie took it with both hands. "I don't need better," she said. They sat in the quiet a long while, firelight dancing on the walls. Outside the snow had begun to fall. Slow, steady, soft. It didn't erase the tracks that had brought them here, but it covered them gently, like a hand placed over a scar. The West doesn't rush. Subscribe and take the long way.